the Chicago Bears will retain their assistant GM, Ian Cunningham, after he interviewed for two other teams. Also, we're going to talk about Jalen Johnson being open to a contract extension and what does that look like for the Chicago Bears. Will Anderson or Jalen Carter, which one is the better fit for the Chicago Bears team? And then three big offseason decisions Ryan Poles and the front office are going to have to make. We're going to talk about all that and more on today's Chicago Bears Central.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bears Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bears news and content.
All right, Bears fans. So Ian Cunningham had interviewed with the Cardinals and the Titans, and it looks like they both have already hired their GM. So that means that Ian Cunningham is going to return to the Chicago Bears, and our new regime that we just got stays intact for at least another year. Now, Cunningham was one of the first people that Ryan Poles hired when he received the job with the Chicago Bears. So that says a lot about what Ryan Poles sees in him and the fact that he wants some part of his staff. You guys know I've been talking about this since it came out that an interview was requested from Cunningham. I've always been of the mindset that I want to keep this regime together as long as possible just to see exactly what they can build. And I know Ryan Poles is the front man. He's the guy making the decisions, but at the same time, you want to try to keep everything in-house as much as you can. So we'll see. But with the interest around Cunningham, it's probably only a matter of time before he does get a GM position with another team. It's just once you start seeing teams kind of interested, it's kind of the clock starts ticking in a way. And so I do think that clock is ticking on him. We'll see how long we retain him here in Chicago, but just wanted to give a quick update on that one. Now, the next one I want to move on to is Jalen Johnson, and he has already mentioned that he wants to shoot for getting a contract extension with the Chicago Bears this offseason. Now, while the Bears do have tons of cap space, we know they got to fill out a lot. And Jalen Johnson, who had a pretty good season, in some ways people call it a bounce back year and things for him. When you look at him only being 23 years old, the fact that he has 1 year left on his deal with a cap hit of a little bit over $20 million, you tend to try to keep those players. And Jalen Johnson is somebody who C-Dub's been very high on. I like the minutes that I've seen from the snaps that I've seen from him as well. And so, as we look forward to it, I wouldn't say that it's outside the realm of possibility that he does get a contract extension with the Chicago Bears if they see in him what we've seen. So far, he's played 39 total games for the Chicago Bears over his 3 years here with the team. Over those years, he has 99 solo tackles, 26 assisted tackles, 2 fumble forced, 1 fumble recovery, and he has 1 interception on his name in his career so far with the Chicago Bears. So, we'll see what it ends up turning into for him. I do think that he is a player that could come back with the Chicago Bears, and considering his age and the fact he was placed on injured reserve, things like that, I think that it's a high probability that he does end up being able to come back here for the Chicago Bears. But that leads us into a discussion of what other decisions that this front office has to make. Now, we know we got Kevin Warren in the building. He's here. He's locked in. But when you look at other free agents that we have on this roster, I kind of talked about it yesterday. One of the people that I talked about was Riley Reiff, saying that I don't think he's coming back, right? Now, with that being said, with Justin Fields sacked 55 times in 2022, Reiff was only responsible for 3 of those sacks and 4 penalties in his time. Now, do you bring the 11-year veteran back? And while I did say yesterday that I assume he's not going to come back, especially as you have to improve that offensive line drastically, the Bears could look at to add him as a depth piece. So he is one of the decisions that they have to decide on. But you have veterans out there as Orlando Brown Jr., Nate Davis, Rodney Hudson, Mike McGlinchey, that you can go into that free agent pool and try to bring back. But depending on the money that you spend elsewhere, you may have a place for Riley Reiff moving forward in that. David Montgomery is another huge decision for the Chicago Bears. He's the biggest one. And I think that, there's been some talk where the Bears look to upgrade. Will they draft a running back? Things like that. You guys know how I feel. I think David Montgomery's coming back. I think he deserves a spot with this team. And so that really, that leads us to the free agents. But one of the biggest offseason decisions that the Chicago Bears have to make, that at least we think that's shaping up, is Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. Or, as we know with the Chicago Bears and what Ryan Poles did even last draft, you could very well, he could have something completely different planned up his sleeve and not draft any one of those and maybe move further down in the draft than what we think. So with that being said, I want to present this. The decision of Will Anderson versus Jalen Carter and present a case for each one. when you look at kind of the draft experts and analysis, a lot of them have Will Anderson above Jalen Carter. When you look at Bleacher Report, The Athletic, Pro Football Focus, Sporting News, Draft Network, Tankathon, they all have the Bears selecting Will Anderson over Jalen Carter. Now, in looking at this, right, Jalen Carter fits the system. He definitely is a system fit for that. He's young, athletic, huge. But when you look at the numbers of it, right, and this is what I'm going to present. I'm going to be clear here. I'm all for Jalen Carter. Now, I know some people are doubting that, and some people look at Will Anderson as the better prospect, and I understand that. I'm going to present the case for both. Jalen Carter has 6 sacks and 15 and a half tackles for a loss in his 2 years in college football. On the contrary to that, Will Anderson, 27 and a half sacks, 48 tackles for a loss, and he shows him up in a lot of key areas. The tape is excellent on both of them. The stats back up Will Anderson, but ultimately, when you look at this team and the decision that they have to make between these two players that really could dictate the front seven on that for a long time, you have to decide what you like. Yes, you can't go wrong with both. At least initially on paper, it seems like you can't go wrong with either one of these. They both have bright careers ahead of them. They both shape up to they could be anchors on that defensive line. And while Will Anderson isn't the system fit, there is a case to be made where you take the best talent available. So that's really the mindset when you look at Jalen Carter versus Will Anderson coming into the Chicago Bears team. It's really a question over fit and overall talent. Now, if you have Jalen Carter ranked as the better overall talent on top of the fit, you go there. But if you look at Will Anderson and what he has been able to do in college football, especially the propensity to be able to get to the quarterback for a team that didn't have that many pressures or sacks on the season. Hell, Jaquan Brisker, it led us in sacks this season. So when you look at those things, it makes a case for Will Anderson. This is going to be a big part. I've already done a video over what the Bears and Ryan Poles and the rumor that the Bears may select a quarterback. That's not likely. We know that they're going to bet on Justin Fields, but when you look at it, Will Anderson versus Jalen Carter, Will Anderson is much more proven, but that doesn't really mean that the ceiling is any lower for Jalen Carter when you look at this draft and bringing in either one of these young players. But Ryan Poles has a huge decision in front of him to make, and with Eberflus being the brand new coach here and him being hopefully the coach here for a while, and that defensive scheme being something that sticks around, it raises the question over scheme versus best talent. And again, the best talent is really, that just is dependent on your own personal view of who you have ranked as the better talent between these two players. Now, I also want to throw in another one. What if Ryan Poles does throw a curveball, right? And not to say draft a quarterback, right? I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at any point in time that he necessarily will draft a quarterback. But when you look at the chance that Ryan Poles goes after a completely different position. Now, a lot of that would be determined by what they get back in any type of trade scenarios for that number 1 overall pick. Because if they do trade it and they go down, for example, the Carolina Panthers, a team that should be really motivated to get a franchise quarterback in that building, could they leapfrog? I think they have the 8th or 9th overall pick, something like that. That drops the Bears out of the Will Anderson, out of the Jalen Carter conversation. And so if that happens, you could look at the Carolina Panthers also. They could just stick at number 9 and maybe draft Will Levis. But if a team like that decides to move up, what then do you do? Do you look at Quinton Johnson, the wide receiver from TCU, who I'm extremely high on, but I doubt the Bears are going to go that way personally? Do you go Paris Johnson from Ohio State, an offensive tackle, when you need another position of need on that offensive side of on that offensive line? The quarterback, Kelly Ringo from Georgia, a teammate of Jalen Carter. There's a lot of really good talent in the NFL, but in this NFL draft. But really, when it boils down to it, I don't see the Bears dropping that low. And because the 3-tech in Matt Eberflus' system is so important to have that good 3 technique, I still think it's going to be Jalen Carter. That's my opinion. I think having him on that interior defensive line, you can do much worse than. But there could be something said about having Will Anderson the edge, especially when the edges that we have on this team currently, and Travis Gibson, Dominique Robinson, just did not shine in a way that we had hoped they would when they got into that starting lineup. So there's enough questions around that, but I'm going to present this to you guys and ask you guys this. If the Bears do decide to go a curveball or trade lower and Will Anderson and Jalen Carter are off the table, what position would you like to see the Bears go after? again, I still think you want to, if you offensive line, if you see it and you have a player ranked that high, but there's still enough quality edges in there, even if they do miss out on Jalen Carter or Will Anderson, you still got Myles Murphy from Clemson, who projects to be a damn good edge himself on that defensive line. So the Bears can still shore up that defensive line or offensive line or go cornerback, which I don't necessarily see them going cornerback, maybe wide receiver, something like that, depending on what else is in that top 10. I don't see the Bears dropping lower than top 10 unless they get a huge haul back. And then that also leaves Noah Sewell from Oregon. And, we'll be doing more draft prospect coverage here by position. That starts next week. So starting on Monday, I'm going to go by position on players that I'd like to see the Bears go after. But it just raises a lot of questions when you think that the Bears and Ryan Poles may not go the way that we expect them to go. Let me know what you guys think on all that down below. But that's it for today's episode. Make sure you follow us at Chi Bear Central. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, ChicagoBearCentral@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text and or voicemail, the number to do so, 773-242-9336. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bears related because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bears. Love you guys. Bear down, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.